Hi, we have Dr. Gabriel Loh from AMD Research here. Thank you for your time. So we have a couple of questions about your work and life and expectations from the students as a future employee or interns. First question is, what do you look from the students? What do you think is the most important things that the students should have?
So for the students, it depends a bit on whether we're talking about interns or a full-time employee. But a very important attribute that I look for is really a willingness to have some flexibility, the willingness to learn. Many, from one company to the next, from one research group to university, there's different methodologies, different tools, different ways of just focusing on things, different objectives. And if a student comes in with good fundamentals, but a willingness to do things a little bit differently, and it's not necessarily better or worse, it's just different. I think there's a lot of opportunity to learn and to grow and to contribute to the things that the company is doing. So I think that's a very important aspect. There's certainly a certain, baseline fundamentals, but in general, I'm not too worried about that. Pretty much all of the candidates that come in are strong on that side. I think many of the faculty already do some pre-selection before us, and so usually it's about what type of approach and how can they contribute to the individual projects.
I see. Attitude is more important than the skill sets, right? So okay. So then, what are the measures of success in industry? What do you think?
So again, that varies quite a bit from company to company, and I'll speak specifically about AMD Research, which is not necessarily the same metrics that other engineers in AMD on product teams are measured by. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, AMD, like many other companies, is a for-profit company. And ultimately, the research lab needs to deliver value in some fashion, in some form, to the rest of the company. And so what I always emphasize to our new employees, and some of the ones that have been around for longer as well, is that it's not really about the metrics. So maybe you publish some papers, maybe you file some patents, you have some technology transfer, but what I usually advise people is you really need to have a good explanation of what kind of value you're providing to the company, and then you use those other metrics as supporting evidence of the value and impact you're having, right? So we're impacting a given product, and as evidence of that, look, there's this, these patents of kind of innovative ideas, there's maybe these papers or other studies. And because as soon as you specify specific metrics, people naturally optimize for those metrics and lose track of really what the broader objective is, right? And for us at AMD, the focus of the lab, it's written in our mission statement, is to help drive the growth and profitability of the company. And we know we do it through technology innovation. But that's really the ultimate objective. And so to really demonstrate your performance, your value, it comes back to that. And of course, we still need to have metrics, because if you don't measure anything, then how do you know how you're doing, right? But it's always critically important, and it's not just AMD Research. This is even in the academic faculty job, right? The same thing applies. New assistant professors may ask, well, how many papers do I have to publish? How many PhD students do I have to graduate? How much funding do I have to bring in? And there's no magic, set of thresholds that if you, check all of those off, you get tenure or you don't get tenure, right? It's really that overall package, right? With the overall value that you're providing, whether it's for us, for our lab and what we're doing for a company, or for a professor and what they're doing with their research program and for a university. I think there's some parallels there.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. You should always think about your impact of your work, and you should demonstrate it. What are the differences between industry and academia? You were a tenured faculty member in the Georgia Tech. What do you think?
There are actually a lot of parallels, and again, I can only speak from a AMD Research perspective. Other companies may do things a bit differently, so your mileage may vary. There are a lot of parallels, I believe. At the end of the day, we all want to do research. We all want to innovate. We want to help grow that next generation of engineers and researchers as well. So I think there are a lot of overlaps, which for me made the transition relatively smooth. There are certainly some differences in the focus, or how it kind of gets back to the previous question. How does one demonstrate one's value, right? In the academic context, it's very much driven by the publications and building up the awareness of your work and the reputation of yourself, your department, and the university within the broader community. On the industrial side, the publications don't have as high of a focus. I mean, they're still important. They still actually serve an important role in the research we do, and they definitely have value. But at the end of the day, my promotion case is not going to rest on how many papers I've published. And so the focus is definitely much more on what kind of value are we delivering directly to the company. But it's not a fair apples and oranges comparison, right? There's different objectives. It's a different organization in the academic world versus the industrial realm. You have to answer to your chair or your dean or provost, right? On the corporate side, because ultimately we have to answer to the CEO or to the shareholders. So there's different objectives that one naturally optimizes for.
I see. Do you have any mentoring options in your company? Like what kind of mentoring options, if there is?
Oh, no, certainly. Mentoring is a very important role for both new employees, our interns, as well as existing employees who have maybe been around for many years. So we have every new employee that comes in, we have a mentor assigned, typically often a formal mentor, someone more senior, as well as what we typically call a buddy to help them just get on board and sort of just figure out a lot of the basics of whether it's just IT related things or whatever it is you need to get going. And then what happens is that with the mentoring, we typically have someone who will mentor someone for some period of time, often with some specific development objectives. And then what we do encourage is after some amount of time, it might be 12 months, might be 18 months, might be 24 months, that they move on to a new mentor, not because that first mentor isn't any good anymore, but there's just more to learn, more perspectives. And then we often will mentor, some of the more senior people will mentor people outside of research as well. And I think that cross-pollination is quite valuable. I remember talking to someone many years ago who said, one of their most valuable mentors ever was someone from marketing.
Oh, marketing?
Because they learn so much more about what really matters to the customers and how you can then, engineer and design better products, that are not necessarily always optimizing for what the engineers want to focus on, but really, something that the customers are going to want. And so gaining those additional perspectives, is actually quite valuable in the long-term development of one's career. And so we have, earlier career mentoring, we have mentoring for people who are, a little bit further on, kind of mid-career. And even, once you get to the more senior levels, we don't have quite the same formal level of mentoring, but we do expect our senior leaders to talk to each other, and there's effectively some form of informal mentoring that does occur. Right? Because I think when you get far enough along, it's kind of an old kind of cliche, right? Like the more you know, the more you know you don't know, right? And so the most senior people really know how much they don't know.
Right, exactly.
But they're comfortable with that, and are comfortable, reaching out into their network to bring in the expertise, the help, the advice, or whatever it is, from other folks, right? So it's more of a mentor support network of sorts rather than a formal mentorship, right? But it's a clearly an important role that we do support. Our objective is that every person we hire, right? Hopefully that's the last time you've ever had to interview, right? It's doesn't always work out that way, especially in the tech industry, but we really view each person we bring in as an investment. It's a long-term investment that we want them to be successful and have a long-term career with us.
That's very nice culture, I think. Nice. Let's move to the work topic. So then, what are the visions of your field? Your own personal opinion, not your company's opinion.
Of the broader computer architecture field?
Yeah, beyond any area that you think.
Well, I
in
think,
the comparison.
yeah, I think it's, this is a very exciting time for computer architecture. And I know this kind of comes up, this is also a bit cliche, right? Everyone says it's never been a better time to be a computer architect. And I think that's always been true because things have just been getting better or things have been getting harder, either way. But there's a lot of challenges ahead of us. I think, especially over the next, many years, next decade or so, sustainability and being able to do more with less is a very significant challenge for the entire industry on multiple fronts. Right? So there's certainly the global implications of energy consumption. There's actually been many talks today at Micro here where people have cited the global power consumption of different data centers and things of that sort. And so there's definitely those concerns, and then that's also coupled with other technological challenges, the slowing down of Moore's law, and the fact that we're not getting quite the same performance reduction per device generationally as we used to, but the demand for more compute is not slowing down. If anything, it's actually accelerating. And so to be able to achieve that, you have to find new ways to greatly enhance the performance per watt capabilities of our systems, right? So I think that's just going to be a huge factor that drives everything we do. And that's driving things like the move towards more heterogeneity and specialization. And obviously the industry's already well down that path, but I think we're going to see more of that going forward. But then it's certainly something that, from an AMD perspective, we've been very strongly focused on. That it's not just increasing performance, but performance per watt is absolutely critical.
How do you select research questions? I actually am also very curious about that. You actually choose questions very well. So how do you find?
Well, I think there's a little bit of survivorship bias in that, right? In that the problems that I don't do a good job of selecting don't see the light of day, right? And so that's it's a good reminder for the PhD students who may be facing paper rejections and such, and you look at others who have all of these accepted papers. You're only seeing their accepted papers. You don't see all of the rejections, right? And so selecting research problems, I don't think anyone gets that 100% correct. And so there's certainly, I get a lot of inspiration from attending conferences and reading papers and seeing what are other people working on, getting ideas. It's hard to read a paper without that inspiring more ideas. And so at least back when we used to have paper copies of everything, and I always have little notes and half-formed ideas jotted down in the margins. And then the other part of it is having a way to honestly to fail quickly, right? Because a lot of those ideas I jot down in the margins, later on when I think about it, I was like, that might not have been the best idea, right? But that's okay so long as I didn't invest a ton of time and effort in it, right? And then sometimes things don't pan out, and that's okay as well. And that's part of research, right? If we knew all the answers, it wouldn't really be research. And so in terms of selecting the problems, you have to do some filtering. It helps, of course, to talk to other people to understand what's important, what are the trends, how might things be happening. But even then, you have to take all the information and synthesize it, right? Because if you ask folks from industry, we have a particular industrial bias, right? We have a bias towards our customers, our markets. If you ask other folks in academia, they may have some biases based off of the types of projects they're interested in, right? So you do have to take everything with a little bit of grain of salt, put it together, and figure out what makes sense for me to spend my time on, right? And then stuff that doesn't pan out, it's still valuable, right? And that I always tell people there's no real thing as a true research failure, right? Because if I pursued a research project, it's because I had some intuition, right? Something in my reasoning made me believe that would work, right? So in the process, if I'm actually analyzing and understanding what's going on, there's going to be some learning and some correction of my intuition, right? Which is then going to make me, find that next problem or find that next research project. It will be better defined, more impactful.
And
right?
you cannot just define the former trial as a failure, right? That actually helped to move on to the next.
Yeah, right. And that's assuming I learned something from it, right? But hopefully, you have, right? Which is why, like the research where, you have an idea, you just push it through your evaluation process and you get an answer, that itself, I don't think, there's some value to that, but it's not as, mostly for me, it's the insights that come out of it that's really the value. What's the learning, right? Because independent of whether those results were good or not, if there's some insight, I'll have gained something from it.
That's great. Okay, so then, so this is a very important question. So, how can we improve academia industry collaborations? These days, industry also publish a lot of papers. Then, how can you engage academia and industry collaborations to be more productive in both sides?
Sure, that's an interesting question. So I think, again, this is going to vary quite a lot from company to company, university to university, and even on specific topics. Because at the end of the day, there will be some topics that a company may or may not be willing to publish on or collaborate on. There will be other topics for which that's perfectly fine, and different companies, even different groups within the company, may have different approaches to that. So from an AMD perspective, in terms of university collaborations, we typically will be open to collaborations which are more in what is often defined as pre-competitive, right? So this is just fundamental research that everyone in the industry really needs to kind of explore and work on, right? And it's sufficiently far ahead that the insights we gain are going to be valuable and help push the field ahead. But ultimately, whether it's ourselves or one of our competitors, if we actually build a solution, it's probably going to look pretty different than whatever we came up with in that kind of pre-competitive phase, right? Because just by the time you get around to it, the technology assumptions may have changed, the market focus or some product assumptions, architecture assumptions may have changed. That will drive each company to come up with their own specific solution. But that baseline fundamental research, is still needed to get us all moving forward. So that's, I think, one area that we do collaborate in, and are certainly happy to do additional collaborations with academics in. The other area is probably around projects involving open source, more on the software side. AMD has been a big proponent and supporter of open source solutions. So currently all of our GPU software is now completely open source. You can just go on GitHub and check out a copy of everything, our compilers, or drivers, whatnot. And so I think that provides a really good foundation, because researchers don't want to the academic researchers don't want to just take some black box code, right? They want to be able to make some changes, make customizations. And it's all out there, available for researchers, right? So that's, I think, another fantastic platform for collaboration.
That's great. So this is also very similar question, but a little bit different aspect. So how did you choose industry over academia? Why did you leave?
Well, so I chose both.
But you
and
left.
Both were, both are fantastic jobs. There's different trade-offs, different balances, but I had a great time at Georgia Tech, having a great time at AMD. And for myself personally, part of it was just a two-body situation, and so just kind of optimizing for some personal circumstances. But both are just great jobs, so couldn't complain about either.
I see. Besides the work, what do you do in daily life? You should have some personal activities and
No, it's absolutely critical to maintain strong work-life balance is kind of the common term, but it's really maybe a life-work balance, or work-life integration, whatever you want to call it, and it's absolutely critical, both long-term in industry, within academia as a PhD student, because this is, as I say, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? And if you run really hard and you get some work done, but then you burn out, it's your average productivity is still going to drop quite considerably, right? And so it's absolutely important. It's something that I've done, since my grad student days. So for me personally, just given background and whatnot. For me, one of my primary outlets is playing ice hockey. And so, back when I was a student, I would go play, ice hockey when I had a game scheduled. When I was faculty at Georgia Tech, there were times where I had a game scheduled. I would go to the rink at 9 or 10 p.m.
9 or 10
play my game, go back to the office and keep working before a micro deadline.
Midnight?
Yeah, it's because it's like I have to work later, but you know what? It's important to go do those other things, right? It's like I never let my work get in the way of, for me, my hockey schedule.
Even before the micro deadline.
Oh,
right
yeah.
before.
Yeah, I had one night where I told the students I'm going to be offline for a couple hours. I'll be back in a little bit. Right, and I went to go play hockey. I didn't tell them I was going to play hockey, right? But I went off, played hockey, came back, and kept working. And it's something that even when I went to teach for a semester in Korea, I found a local group there in Korea, and I was playing hockey twice a week while I was there. So for me, that's a important stress reliever. It kind of resets things. So, as strange as it sounds, it's almost like a form of meditation. Because for 60 minutes, for an hour of time, my brain, I don't think about anything else. My entire world is chasing a small black disc of rubber. Right, and everything kind of gets flushed out, and intellectually, kind of the emotional chemicals or whatever, kind of gets reset, and so it's in a strange way, kind of meditative for me. And so that's something that I continue, to this day, at least up until my body no longer lets me. Just a way to switch your brain into a different gear, right, and that can help. And I think that's definitely important to find those ways to whatever it is that works for you. And sometimes you have to experiment. You have to try different things to see what works, what doesn't work. And we also change over time, right? So what might have worked for the last 5 years may stop working because something in your life has changed or whatever. So definitely it's important, I think, to also try some new things from time to time.
So this is the last question. What is your personal life goal, if you don't mind sharing?
So I think overall, it's fairly simple. As try to be a good person and try to do some good. Right? I think that kind of sums it up. Because I think more than that, it's it's hard to say really, right? Because the world changes, life changes, and so. Beyond that, I think it's hard to say. Right? So I think try to be a good person, try to be good to others, and then try to do something to help the planet, help people.
Wow.
That's about it.
That's great. Actually, I remember on your research lab homepage, I found this quote that you just mentioned, that be excellent to each other. And that actually inspired me a lot.
Do you know what that's from?
Oh, I heard that is from some. Is it from some movie?
It's a very old movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I see.
Not a formal endorsement.
Okay. You just follow that.
Yeah, I think right, because it's a comedy movie, but I think that statement is actually quite good, right? Because the normal golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do to you. Right? I think that leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Or what if I want other people to treat me poorly? Does that then allow me to treat people poorly? Be excellent to each other is unambiguous. It doesn't really matter how you want to treat other people, how you want them to treat you. So no, just be excellent. Right? It's not just good. Right? Because the problem, good still leaves some error margin. Or like good for you might not be good for me. Like excellent, even if we disagree on how much excellence is, it's probably still better than good.
I see. Better than good.
So yeah, it has a built-in margin that I think is better for society.
That's great, inspirable. Okay, thank you so much. That is all, and thank you for your great time.
All right, and make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet.